Hello and welcome to the Following Truth Live Teach. I'm LJ. The title of this study today is going to be, Is New Testament Tithing Biblical? Before I start, if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. And if you're new here, welcome. You can follow me on my website, www.followintruth.com, or on on Facebook at Following Truth Biblical Studies. And you can also purchase my books through Amazon. A link is in the description below. If you would like to support my work and help me to produce more videos, you can help through PayPal, and that's lj3pland@gmail.com. Again, a link is in the description. Okay, so New Testament tithing. It's a big topic. It's quite a long and in-depth topic that we're going to cover today. There's a lot of scripture to be looked at. It is a little bit complicated. I'll try and keep it as easy as I can, but it is an in-depth doctrine. There's a lot to get through. There's a lot of verses that are used to prove this doctrine. It's, for me, I don't teach tithing at all. If somebody wants to support me or anyone else, I'm more than happy. And it's much needed for people like myself. If somebody wants to give from their own heart, they want to give, then that's perfectly acceptable. I do not teach tithing. I wouldn't accept a tithe. If somebody said to me that they wanted to give me their tithe, I would reject it, no matter how much that was. Tithing is not something that I think that the New Testament church should be doing. We're going to see that there is a difference between an offering and a tithe. But like I say, if anybody wants to tithe, I wouldn't accept that myself. So the debate over tithing is an ongoing, and it's quite passionate. There are people that fall into two camps on this. The New Testament believer is obliged to offer tithes of 10% of their income. And this is usually in the form of money. This is, you'll see that all of the prosperity preachers in America, they're not just in America, but there are plenty in America that preach that you have to give your 10%. Net or gross is another thing. That's debatable as well. But this is what they will teach, and this is what they preach, that you must give 10% of your income. And in fact, there are many churches in America where if you don't give your 10%, they will publicly name you in your church. So there's the second belief, like what I hold, is that in the New Testament, under the new covenant that we have, there is no obligation to tithe. If somebody was to tithe, I would, like I said, I wouldn't accept it. I would say, if you want to give a tithe, if you want to give 10% of your money away, as a tithe, go and give it to somebody that is in desperate need. Go give it to somebody on the street. That, for me, that would be what I would say. I would say don't tithe, but if you're going to do it, then give it to somebody that is in desperation. Don't give it to the church because they've told you to do it. Feel free to give your tithe to the church if that's what you feel, but don't do it because they've told you, and that God is going to be angry with you, or that he's going to bless you if you give your 10%. If you give your 10%, and he will give you 100-fold. And this, they will go to verses where they will literally try and prove to you that you can be blessed 100-fold back by God. God does not need your money in order to bless you. If God wants to bless you, he'll bless you regardless. And like I say, there is a difference between offering and a tithe. Now, those that argue against the New Testament tithe, like myself, will say that it's part of the Mosaic law. It's part of the Levitical law, part of the Old Covenant, which we are no longer under. Most people that say this, like myself, will hold to the belief that there is a free will offering. There's no set time scale, there's no obligation to do so, and there's no set amount. It's what you feel, what is in the heart to give. If that is, you're walking by a homeless person and you feel like giving them some money, or I would say give them some food or something like that, then that's fine. If you have the sudden urge to give away 50% of your money, if you earn enough money to be able to do that, then find a good cause in order to do it, and that's fine. And that is something that a New Testament believer should do, but they shouldn't feel obligated and have any specific amount that they should do. Buying a homeless person a cup of coffee is more than enough. Those that say tithing is for the New Testament believer will more than often refer back to the Old Testament in order to prove tithing. They will use Abraham, Jacob, the Israelites, and most often point to a passage in Malachi where it talks about in tithes robbing God. So in this study, we're going to look at all of those. In order to answer this question, it's important to understand exactly what a tithe is. If a person is going to quote the Bible in order to promote the biblical tithe, then they should at least use the Bible to define what that tithe is. So the first thing that we need to understand is that, unlike what people believe and teach, a tithe does not mean a 10% giving or offering to God. Many people see the word tithe and automatically read into that this understanding that that's what it is. So every time they see the word tithe, it automatically means 10% given to God. But that's not actually true. The word tithe simply means a tenth of anything. Anything that you can have 10% of is a tithe. There are two Hebrew words translated as tithe in the Old Testament, asar, and it means a tenth. and it can be translated as tithe. Now, if you have 10 children, 1/10 of your children is an asar. It's a tenth. It is 10% of your children. Contrary to what most people believe, it is not the 10% given to God. It can mean that, but not explicitly. Now, the second word is ma'asar, or masar. And again, it means a tenth, but also means a tithe. But they have origins in the same word, but they are different words, and they do mean slightly different. And we need to understand which word is being used and when, because they are slightly different. The word asar is translated as tenth and not as tithe in passages such as 1 Samuel 8:15 through 17. 1 Samuel 8:15, and he will take the 10th asar of your seed and of your vineyards, and give to his officers and to his servants. And he will take your men servants and your maidservants and your goodliest men and your asses and put them to work. He will take the 10th asar of your sheep, and ye shall be his servants. These verses are not related in any way to a tithe, the tithing as in giving to God. Now, under the law, God did command a tithe offering, which means God commanded an offering of a tithe or a tenth, and this is where much of the confusion comes from. When what a tithe is and a tithe offering are not understood, it can lead to incorrect teaching. It is very important that we establish what this tenth that God commanded was from, to whom that it would be given, and for what purpose. So the Jewish people believed that there were 3 separate tithes, none of which, however, involved the tithing of money. If tithing is for a New Testament believer, then surely it should at least be the same as what the believers of the Old Testament tithed, or the people in the Old Testament, what they actually tithed. Some proponents of the New Testament tithe will claim that the Jewish people did not tithe money because when the tithe was instructed by God, money was not in use at the time. So they didn't tithe money because it didn't exist. However, money was in use all the way back in the days of Abraham, long before the time of the law was ever given. The law was given 430 years after the promise was given to Abraham. But there are many, many examples of money being used a long time before the law. I should just give a couple of examples here. Genesis 17:12. Genesis 17:12 is a long time before Exodus, where the law is given. And he that is 8 days old shall be circumcised among you, and every man child in your generations, he that is born in the house or bought with money of any stranger which is not of thy seed. So we see God commanding here bought with money. So that clearly proves that. And Joseph was sold by his brothers, Genesis 37:28. Then there passed by Midianites, merchantmen, and they drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit and sold Joseph to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver. And though they brought Joseph into Egypt. Now, it's quite clear that silver was being used as money in order to purchase. Anyone who uses that argument, and there are people that will use that, is either biblically ignorant or deliberately trying to mislead. Either way is completely false. And if somebody says that, instantly you know that they're talking either wrong because they don't know any different, or because they want your money. We are first introduced to God's tithe in Leviticus. God's tithe will become relevant later. Leviticus 27:30, and all the tithe of the land, whether of the seed of the land or of the fruit of the tree, is the Lord's. It is holy unto the Lord. So this verse actually states that it's a tithe of the land. The seed or fruit of is the Lord's, and it is holy. So the command is that all of the tenth of the land and produce of the land is the Lord's. 10% of the land and produce belongs to God. God's tithe is not an offering, but a tenth that already belongs to him. This land, which we'll get into a little bit later, is the promised land. It is only in the promised land. We are told that a man can redeem any part of his tithe by adding a fifth part of it. Leviticus 27:31. And if a man will at all redeem out of his tithes, he shall add thereunto the fifth part of it. Simply meaning that if a man wants to purchase back his tithe that he had to give, which, as we've seen, is 10% of his own produce from the land or of his cattle, then he could redeem that back by giving an extra fifth, or an extra 20% on top of the value of that, the tithe that he was going to give. Now, if that was money, it would mean literally saying that you could buy your $1 back by giving $1.20, and that makes literally no sense whatsoever. We are then told about the tithe of the livestock in the next verse, Leviticus 27:32. And concerning the tithe of the herd, or of the flock, even of whatsoever passeth under the rod, the tenth shall be holy unto the Lord. He shall not search whether it be good or bad, neither shall he change it. And if he change it at all, then both it and the change thereof, it shall be holy. It shall not be redeemed. So again, simply the tenth of the herd, or any live animal that passeth under the rod, the shepherd's rod. This is the way that the livestock was counted, under the rod. 1, 2, 3. It's holy to the Lord. And importantly, and this will play a part a little bit later, it did not matter of what the condition was of that livestock. There was no, you didn't have to search which was good or which was bad, and this will play a part later. There is no command here to give anything to anyone at the moment. The tithe, this command here, there's literally no command. All it states is that a tenth of what a person has in terms of land and produce belongs to the Lord. It's his, and that it is holy. And it's, again, it's part of the promised land. Now, it isn't until we get to Numbers 18 that we are told the command concerning the tithe, the 10th part, that belongs to the Lord. Numbers 18:21. And behold, I have given the children of Levi all the 10th, Asar, in Israel for an inheritance, for their service which they serve, even the service of the tabernacle of the congregation. Neither must the children of Israel henceforth come nigh the tabernacle of the congregation, lest they bear sin and die. But the Levites shall do the service of the tabernacle of the congregation, and they shall bear their iniquity. It shall be a statute forever throughout your generations, that among the children of Israel they have no inheritance. But the tithes of the children of Israel, which they offer as an heave offering unto the Lord, I have given them to the Levites to inherit. Therefore I have said unto them, among the children of Israel they shall have no inheritance. So the tithe, or the 10% of the produce of the land and the livestock of a person, that would be offered to the Lord as a heave offering, would be the inheritance of the Levites. Now, heave is the Hebrew word teruma. It means a contribution, specifically one for sacred use. So, actually, the Levites were commanded to offer a heave offering, a contribution, which was a tithe, 10%, of what they had in terms of produce, which the Lord had stated was his. And this would be the inheritance of the Levites. When Israel was divided between the tribes of the children of Israel, the Levites were not given any land or no possession. So they didn't produce their own produce. They didn't have cattle. So in order to survive, they would take the 10% that was God's, and God gave that 10% to the Levites, who were the priests. And so all the other tribes would give 10% of what they produced each year, and they would give those to the Levites that lived in their land. It's as simple as that. The Levites were to look after the tabernacle. So they were exempt from any inheritance of any of the land. So they didn't produce anything, and so they needed to be supported, basically. And that's exactly what the tithe was for. Numbers 147, and this is quite a long passage, so please try and stay with me as I read this. But the Levites, after the tribe of their fathers, were not numbered among them. They were not numbered among Israel. For the Lord had spoken unto Moses, saying, Only thou shalt not number the tribe of Levi, neither take the sum of them among the children of Israel. But thou shalt appoint the Levites over the tabernacle of testimony, and over all the vessels thereof, and over all things that belong to it. They shall bear the tabernacle and the vessels thereof, and they shall minister unto it, and shall encamp round about the tabernacle. And when the tabernacle setteth forward, the Levites shall take it down, and when the tabernacle is to be pitched, the Levites shall set it up, and the stranger that cometh nigh shall be put to death. And the children of Israel shall pitch their tents, every man by his own camp, and every man by his own standard, throughout their hosts. But the Levites shall pitch around about the tabernacle of testimony, that there be no wrath upon the congregation of the children of Israel. And the Levites shall keep the charge of the tabernacle of testimony. And the children of Israel did accordingly to all that the Lord commanded Moses, so did they. So we see the instructions were for the Levites to kind of be separated from the rest of the tribes. And it was their specific job to stop people from coming around the tabernacle, and they were to look after the tabernacle. The Levites were classed at this time. They were classed as the firstborn of Israel. Numbers 3:12. And I, behold, I have taken the Levites from among the children of Israel instead of all the firstborn that opened the matrix among the children of Israel. Therefore, the Levites shall be mine. So they were the tribe that God had taken to himself. They were to be his ministers. They were to be his priests. The tithe, the heave offering, the 10%, was going to take place in the promised land and was only for the promised land. The tithe was never imposed on anyone other than the Israelite living in the promised land, and it only came into effect when they had entered into the promised land. The law was given a long, long time before they actually entered into the promised land, 40 years basically. After the law was given, and we have the golden calf incident, and then we have the wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. Well, they didn't tithe at that time because they had no land, they had no produce. So they weren't tithing. It was only when they came into the land that they started to tithe. Deuteronomy 12:1. These are the statutes and judgments which ye shall observe to do in the land, which the Lord God of thy fathers giveth thee to possess it, all the days that you live upon the earth. So we see here it was only for the land. All the tithes of the people and all the other offerings were to be taken to the place that God would choose. Deuteronomy 12:5. Again, this is quite a long passage. But unto the place which the Lord your God shall choose out of all your tribes to put his name there, even unto his habitation shall ye seek, and thither thou shalt come. And thither ye shall bring your burnt offerings and your sacrifices and your tithe and your heave offerings of your hand and your vows and your freewill offerings and the firstlings of your herds and of your flocks. Ye shall not do after all the things that we do here this day, every man whatsoever is right in his own eyes. For ye are not as yet come to the rest and to the inheritance which the Lord your God giveth you. So God was saying here, you don't, when you're bringing all your tithes and all your offerings and everything, we don't do it as we're going to do this in the land, because you're not there yet. But when you go over Jordan and dwell in the land which your Lord your God giveth you to inherit, and when he giveth you rest from all your enemies round about, so that ye dwell in safety, then there shall be a place which the Lord your God shall choose to cause his name to dwell there. Thither shall ye bring all that I command you, your burnt offerings, and your sacrifices, and your tithes, and your heave offerings of your hand, and all your choice vows which ye vow unto the Lord. And ye shall rejoice before the Lord your God. Ye and your sons, and your daughters, and your menservants, and your maidservants, and the Levite that is within your gates, the gates of that particular tribe. For as much as he has no part nor inheritance with you. This is a command here, God going through saying, this is not long, actually, Deuteronomy, this is not long before they actually entered into the promised land, and this is God saying, right, when we get to the promised land, I'm going to set up a place where you're going to bring all your tithes to. But this is what's going to happen when we get into the promised land. Now, I have heard some preachers use this part to claim that God should choose your church. As it says, God says, I will choose a place where I want you to bring your tithes and everything. And actually, some preachers do use this to say that God should choose your church. And it's normally theirs. He's telling me that this is the church that God has chosen for you to bring your tithes. Convenient. However, this is clearly not what is being referenced here. This was simply referring to where the tabernacle would eventually be sited in the promised land. There is the command that this is where you would eat those tithes and offerings. Deuteronomy 12:7. And there you shall eat before the Lord your God, and ye shall rejoice in all that ye put your hand unto, and your households, wherein the Lord thy God hath blessed thee. The eat kind of gives an indication that this is food. This is produce, not money. The tithe of the promised land, the land that God had given, was to be taken to the place that God would choose, and it would be eaten there. God commands that the people could not eat their offerings, including their tithes, within their own gates, within their own part of the land. Deuteronomy 12:17. Thou mayest not eat within thy gates the tithe of your corn, or of thy wine, or of thy oil, or the firstlings of thy herds, or of thy flock, nor any of thy vows which thou vowest, nor thy freewill offerings or heave offerings of thy hand, but thou must eat them before the Lord thy God in the place which the Lord thy God shall choose. Thou and thy son and thy daughter and thy maidservant and thy manservant and the Levite that is within thy gates. And thou shalt rejoice before the Lord thy God in all that thou puttest thine hands unto, to take heed thyself that thou forsake not the Levite as long as thou livest upon the earth. They were, again, so this is being told specifically that they had to eat the tithe where God told them to do so, and they must look after the Levite. They must provide. They have to give to the Levite. Now, the people were told to eat them before the Lord. Unlike what most people commonly believe, the 10% was given for the Levites as if they produced it. And it was counted as their yearly produce. The Levites took the heave offering of the people as their own produce. However, the people ate their own tithes. The Levites joined in the feast on the tithe also. The Levites were supported by the remainder of the tithe that was left after the feast, and by the other offerings, including the free will offerings. Now, God had sanctified them to himself, and his 10% that belonged to him, that the Israelites would offer as a contribution, would be used as if the Levites had produced it themselves, seeing that they had no land in which to produce. Aaron and his lineage had charge over the tithe and the heave offering of the people, Numbers 18:8. And the Lord spake unto Aaron, Behold, I also have given thee the charge of mine heave offering, and of all the hallowed things of the children of Israel. Unto thee have I given them by reason of the anointing, and to the sons by an ordinance forever. They specifically would also get any sin sacrifice, meat offerings, and trespass offerings. They would have to eat at the place which God had set aside as well, Numbers 18:9. This shall be thine of the most holy things, reserved from the fire, every oblation of theirs, every meat offering of theirs, and every sin offering of theirs, and every trespass offering of theirs, which they shall render unto me, shall be most holy for thee and for thy sons. In the most holy place shalt thou eat it. Every male shall eat it. It shall be holy unto thee. And this is thine, the heave offering of their gift, with all the wave offerings of the children of Israel. I have given them unto thee, and to thy sons, and to thy daughters, with thee, by a statute forever. Every one that is clean in thy house shall eat of it. Now Aaron, who was a Levite, being a son of Levi, and his sons were given specifically, it was the sons of Aaron that were given the priesthood. All priests, therefore, were Levites, but not all Levites were priests. Only those that descended from Aaron could be high priests. Exodus 28:1. And take thou unto thee Aaron thy brother, and his sons with him, from among the children of Israel, that they may minister unto me in the priest's office, even Aaron, Nadab, and Abihu, Eleazar, and Ithmaar, Aaron's sons. Now the Levites would take the tithe, or the heave offering, from the people. The Levites themselves were to make a heave offering to the Lord from that 10%. So they would take the 10% and then they would tithe 10% of that 10%, which was counted for their produce. And they would get to give what it was essentially 1% in total. So you have 10% of 100. Is 10, so you have the 10, and then you have the Levites would offer a heave offering of 10% of that 10. So they would give 1%, and that would be their tithe. Now, giving in the sense was to use this special feast to the Lord. They were also to eat the heave offering, Numbers 18:25. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Thus speak unto the Levites, and say unto them, When ye take of the children of Israel the tithe which I have given you, from them for your inheritance, then ye shall offer up an heave offering of it for the Lord, even a 10th part of the tithe. And this is your heave offering, and shall be reckoned unto you, as though it were the corn of the threshing floor, and as the fullness of the winepress. Now the Levites would give their tithe to Aaron, who was the high priest. And that we see in Numbers 18 28 through 29. Thus ye also shall offer an heave offering unto the Lord of all your tithes, which ye shall receive of the children of Israel, and ye shall give therefore the Lord's heave offering to Aaron the priest. This offering, their heave offering, was to be the best 10% of the heave offering that they received from the Israelites. So the Israelites didn't have to give the best of their produce, but Aaron, the priests, when they offered their 10% of the 10%, they had to choose the best of all of that tithe. So they had to tithe the best of whatever was given. But it had to be, for them, they had to give the best. Numbers 29, and out of all your gifts ye shall offer every heave offering of the Lord, of all the best thereof, even the hallowed part thereof out of it. Therefore thou shalt say unto them, when ye have heaved the best thereof from it, then it shall be counted unto the Levites as the increase of their threshing floor, and as the increase of their winepress. And ye shall eat it in every place, and your households, for it is your reward for your service in the tabernacle of the congregation, and ye shall bear no sin by reason of it, when ye have heaved from it the best of it. Neither shall ye pollute the holy things of your children, the things of the children of Israel, lest ye die. Okay, so I know it's getting a little bit complicated. The Levites are told in verse 31 that their heave offering could be eaten anywhere, in every place. This 1%, the 10% of the 10%, did not have to be eaten in the most holy place, unlike the other Israelites who had to eat theirs in the holy place. So, okay, let's go back. So the Levites would produce produce in the promised land. They would give 10%. This would be counted as if it was the Levites' own produce. And then from that 10% that was given to the Levites would have to give the best of that 10% as their offering, and they would have to eat that. But it's important when we get later on, we'll get to Malachi, when it says that you're robbing God in tithes. This had to be the best of the 10%. They didn't get to choose. It just had to be the best. Whereas the the Israelites, they could give 10%. It didn't matter. They didn't have to look at which was the best. They just take 10% of their produce, and that was their tithe. But the Levites couldn't do that. But as we can see, the tithe was clearly food, and it was drink. It was food, and from the wine press, and it was nothing more. It had to be eaten. So the tithe, they literally ate their tithe. And this was as if this was accepted by the Lord as him accepting the tithe. But then again, the people are told that they should tithe 1/10 of all the increase of the seed that their field produced each year. And this is the tithe that should be eaten in the place that the Lord would put his name to. And once a year, there would be a feast to the Lord at the temple, and it would be eaten by the people and the Levites that dwelled within their lands. Deuteronomy 14:22. Thou shalt truly tithe all the increase of thy seed that the field bringeth forth year by year, and thou shalt eat thereof before the Lord thy God in the place which he shall choose to place his name there. The tithe of thy corn, of thy wine, of thine oil, and the firstlings of thine herds and the flocks, that thou mayest learn to fear the Lord thy God always. This was to be a tithe, 10%, a tenth of all the increase of the seed. So literally 10% of everything that was produced that year. The tithe of the Israelites was not used to support the Levites on a daily basis. This was used to give to the Levites as their produce. The Levites would live from all of the sin sacrifices and things like that they would on a daily basis that they would live by. And it was always to be done at the place where the Lord put his name. Now they were told that if the place, because Israel, we know that the tabernacle was placed in Jerusalem. Israel is a lot bigger than just Jerusalem. So the Israelites were told that if the place that they were required to go to was too far, that they could sell all the items, the 10% tithe, and they could take the money with them. And this again gets used to say that, they could give money. If it was too far, they could take money. But they stop far too early in the teaching here. And when we go a little bit further on in the verses, we'll see exactly what they were meant to do with that money. Deuteronomy 14:24. And if the way be too long for thee, so that thou art not able to carry it, or if the place be too far from thee, which the Lord thy God shall choose to set his name there, when the Lord thy God hath blessed thee, then thou shalt turn it into money, and bind up the money in thine hand, and shalt go unto the place which the Lord thy God shall choose. And they will stop. And they will say, well, so you can take money, and so you're going to give your money. It's fine. Money is good for the tithe. But if we continue on to the next verse, and thou shalt bestow that money for whatsoever thy soul lusteth after, for oxen, for sheep, or for wine, or for strong drink, or for whatsoever thy soul desireth, and thou shalt eat there before the Lord thy God, and thou shalt rejoice, thou and thine household. And the Levite that is within thy gates, thou shalt not forsake him, for he hath no part nor inheritance with thee. When the Israelites got to the place where God was, where they were going to eat, they could buy, with the money that they brought, anything that they wanted in order to eat at the festival. What they could buy and drink whatever they wanted. There was no commitment to have to purchase the exact same things what they produced, so they could buy whatever they wanted to buy. But they had to change the money for oxen, for sheep, for wine, for whatever they wanted, and they had to eat it before the Lord. So if anybody preaches to you, and Deuteronomy 14:24 and verse 25, tell them to continue reading to verse 26 and 27. And it was important that, again, they looked after the Levite. So, every 3 years, the tithe was not to be eaten where God has put his name. Every 3 years, the tithe could be eaten within the person's own land, and not that special place. Deuteronomy 14:28. At the end of 3 years, thou shalt bring forth all the tithe of the land of thine increase the same year, and shalt lay it up within thine gates in the 3rd year. And it wasn't just the Levites who would share that year's offering, but also the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. They would be invited to participate in the feast. I don't know how many pastors and preachers will point to that, but in verse Deuteronomy 14:29, and the Levite, because he hath no part nor inheritance with thee, and the stranger, and the fatherless, and the widow, which are within thy gates, shall come, and shall eat, and shall be satisfied, that the Lord thy God may bless thee in all the work of thine hand, which thou doest. And again, it's eat. Deuteronomy 26, 1 through 11, is a one-off offering. It was the first of all the fruit of the earth that the promised land gave. The Israelites would make a declaration to God and acknowledge that God had given them the land that was promised. And this included the Levites and the strangers. So this next passage that I'm going to read, and again, it is quite a long passage, is Deuteronomy 26, 1 through 11. This offering was a one-off. It was purely for when the Israelites got into the promised land. This offering was given, this tithe, and it was as a celebration, basically, for being given the land. And it shall be, when thou art come into the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee for an inheritance, and possessed it, and dwellest therein, that thou shalt take of the first of all the fruit of the earth, which thou shalt bring of thy land, that the Lord thy God giveth thee, and shalt put it in a basket, and shall go unto the place which the Lord thy God shall choose to place his name there. So the first, basically the first fruit. This is the first fruit. When they went into the land, the first produce went to the Lord. And thou shalt go, unto the priest that shall be in those days, and say unto him, I profess this day unto the Lord thy God, that I am come unto the country which the Lord sware unto our fathers for to give us. And the priest shall take the basket out of thine hand, and set it down before the altar of the Lord thy God. And thou shalt speak and say before the Lord thy God, a Syrian ready to perish was my father, and he went down into Egypt and sojourned there with a few, and became there a nation great, mighty, and populous. And the Egyptians evil entreated us, and afflicted us, and laid upon us hard bondage. And when we cried unto the Lord God of our fathers, the Lord heard our voice, and looked on our affliction, and our labor, and our oppression. And the Lord brought us forth out of Egypt with a mighty hand, and with an outstretched arm, and with a great trembleness, and with signs and with wonders. And he hath brought us into this place, and hath given us this land, even a land which floweth with milk and honey. And now, behold, I have brought the first fruits of the land, which thou, O Lord, hast given me, and thou shalt set it before the Lord thy God, and worship before the Lord thy God. And thou shalt rejoice in every good thing which the Lord thy God hath given thee. And unto this house, thou and thy Levite, and the stranger that is among you. And again, on the third year, once the tithe had been made, the Levite, the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow have been fed. Deuteronomy 26:12. When thou hast made an end of tithing all the tithes of thine increase, the third year, which is the year of tithing, and hast given it unto the Levite, the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, that they may eat within thy gates and be filled, the people would declare again unto the Lord that they have done so. This also would be just as for the first time on the third year. So again, this wouldn't be every third year that they would say this. This was only on the first time of the third year, when they weren't to go to the place where God put his name. They had their first feast in their own their own gates. This they would have to say again, literally, just at one time, a very long time ago. Then thou shalt say unto the Lord thy God, I have brought away the hallowed things of mine house, and also have given them unto the Levite, and unto the stranger, to the fatherless, and to the widow, according to all thy commandments which thou hast commanded me. I have not transgressed thy commandments, neither have I forgotten them. I have not eaten thereof in my mourning, neither have I taken away out thereof for any unclean use, nor given out thereof for the dead, but I have hearkened to the voice of the Lord my God, and have done according to all that thou hast commanded me. Look down from thy holy habitation from heaven, and bless thy people Israel, and the land which thou hast given us, as thou swearest unto our fathers, a land that floweth with milk and honey. In every single use of the tithe by the command of God in the law, it is a reference to food and drink. There is no other reference in the command of God other than food or drink. Tithing in the Old Testament, in the Old Covenant, was never money. It was never to support the Levites throughout the year. It was to provide a feast unto the Lord once a year, that the people of Israel would eat the tithe in celebration to the Lord who had brought them into the promised land. They would offer 10% of the blessing that they had already received during the year, an offering because of the blessing, not an offering to receive a blessing, as most pastors or preachers or prosperity teachers or whatever you want to call them today teach. It was it is true that they did not offer the heave offering after the already given blessing. But if they didn't give that tithe, then the next year they wouldn't be blessed as much. But that was because they hadn't given the 10% of what they had already been blessed. So the blessing came first, then the tithe, then the next year's blessing. But they weren't blessed because they tithed because they were blessed. And this is where we actually we come to the verses in Malachi that come to the real truth. Malachi 3:8, and this is the verse. It's taken a long time to get here, but this is the verse that most pastors will use. Malachi 3:8. Will a man rob God? Yet ye have robbed me. But ye say, wherein have we robbed thee? In tithes and offerings, is God's reply. So this verse is used, you must tithe, otherwise you're robbing God. And they use verse 9 as the scare tactic in order to make people tithe that money. Malachi 3:9. Ye are cursed with a curse, for ye have robbed me, even this whole nation. If you do not tithe to God your 10%, you've robbed him, and he will curse you. This I see a lot in Africa and America being used. These two verses particularly. Now I know it's taken us a long time to get here, but it was really important to, and I know it was complicated. There was a lot of scripture there, but it was really important that we understand that the tithe was always money. It was always produce. It was never money, and it was always eaten in the promised land where God had put his name. Anybody that is teaching that we must give 10% money, this is why that part was really, really important to understand. But now we need to understand this passage. And they then go to verse 10, after they've used verse 8 to tell you that you've robbed God, and they've in verse 9 to say that God will curse you if you don't give him. They then go to verse 10 to show that if you tithe, he'll bless you. So bring ye all the tithes into the storehouse, that there may be meat in mine house, and prove me now herewith, saith the Lord of hosts, if I will not open the windows of heaven and pour out a blessing, that there shall not be room enough to receive it. So if you give your tithe, you will be blessed. But this, as we've already seen, is the tithe. For a start, you've already been blessed. You then tithe the 10%, and then you're blessed again. The blessings continue. The blessings come first. But it's so important that we understand this passage now and who God is actually speaking to and why. So basically what they've done is they've taken these verses, ripped them out of the context, which we're now going to put it back into. Malachi is only 4 chapters long. I really suggest, if you want to delve into this properly, read Malachi. It's only 4 chapters. It'll take you half an hour. The answer is actually found within the book. So let's have a look. Firstly, we need to notice that God says, in tithes you rob me. God did not say through lack of tithes, or because you didn't tithe, you rob me. It wasn't because they were not tithing that they robbed God. It was in their tithe that they robbed God. But who was God talking to? Who was he saying robbed him? Tithe preachers today will say that this is anyone that is not giving their 10%. But when we look at the verses in context, we will get a totally different referent. God was actually talking to the priests, to the Levites. And we have to go back to the beginning of Malachi in order to get the context and the understanding. He makes a series of statements to the priests which precede a series of questions and then a series of answers to those questions. The questions revolve around offerings. Malachi 1:6. A son honoureth his father, and a servant his master. If then I be a father, where is mine honour? And if be a master, where is my fear? Saith the Lord of hosts unto you. O priests that despise my name, so he's talking to the priests, and ye say, wherein have we despised thy name? Ye offer polluted bread upon my altar, and ye say, wherein have we polluted thee? In that ye say, the table of the Lord is contemptible. The offerings that the priests were offering were polluted. Malachi 1:8. And if ye offer the blind for sacrifice, is it not evil? And if you offer the lame and sick, is it not evil? Offer it now unto thy governor. Will he be pleased with thee, or accept thy person? God then tells them that he will not accept their offerings. Malachi 1:10. Who is there even among you that would shut the doors for naught? Neither do ye kindle fire on mine altar for naught. I have no pleasure in you, saith the Lord of hosts. Neither will I accept an offering at your hand. His name is great, but the priests had corrupted it. Malachi 1:11. For from the rising of the sun, even unto the going down of the same, my name shall be great among the Gentiles, and in every place incense shall be offered unto my name, and a pure offering. For my name shall be great among the heathen, saith the Lord of hosts. But ye have profaned it, in that ye say, the table of the Lord is polluted, and the fruit thereof, even his meat, is contemptible. They were offering the torn, lame, and sick animals upon the altar. Malachi 1:13. Ye said also, behold, what weariness as it is, and ye have snuffed at it. And the Lord of hosts, and ye brought that which was torn, and the lame, and the sick. Thus ye brought an offering Should I accept this of your hand, saith the Lord? But cursed be the deceiver, which hath in his own flock a male, and voweth and sacrificeth unto the Lord a corrupt thing. For I am a great king, saith the Lord of hosts, for my name is dreadful among the heathen. Now God continues talking to the priests in Malachi chapter 2. Malachi 2:1. And now, O priests, this commandment is for you. If ye will not hear, and if ye will not lay it to heart, to give glory unto my name, saith the Lord of hosts, I will even send a curse upon you, and I will curse your blessings. Yea, I have cursed them already, because ye do not lay it to heart. The priests had fallen away from their covenant with God. Malachi 2:3. Behold, I will corrupt your seed and spread dung upon your faces, even the dung of your solemn feasts, and one shall take you away with it. And ye shall know that I have sent this commandment unto you, that my covenant might be with Levi, saith the Lord of hosts. My covenant was with him, of life and peace, and I gave them to him for the fear wherewith he feared me, and was afraid before my name. The law of truth was in his mouth, and iniquity was not found in his lips. He walked with me in peace and equity, and did turn many away from iniquity. For the priest's lips should keep knowledge, and they should seek the law at his mouth. For he is the messenger of the Lord of hosts. But ye are departed out of the way. Ye have cursed many to humble at the law. Ye have corrupted the covenant of Levi, saith the Lord of hosts. Therefore have I also made you corruptible, and base there before all the people, according as ye have not kept my ways, but have been partial in the law. Judah had gone after strange gods. Malachi 2:10. Have we not all one Father? Hath not one God created us? Why do we deal treacherously, every man against his brother, by profaning the covenant of our fathers? Judah hath dealt treacherously, an abomination in commitment in Israel and in Jerusalem. For Judah hath profaned the holiness of the Lord, which he loved, and hath married the daughter of a strange god. The Lord will cut off the man that doeth this, the master of and the scholar, out of the tabernacles of Jacob, and him that offereth an offering unto the Lord of hosts. Now, God said that he would not accept offerings. This means that the offerings were still being made, but through their contempt of God and his altar, and the sacrificing of unacceptable sacrifices, God would not accept them. Malachi 2:13. And this have ye done again, covering the altar of the Lord with tears, with weeping, and with crying out, insomuch that he regardeth not the offering any more, or receive it with good will at your hand. So then we get to passage about robbing God. So to understand all what I've just gone through, Malachi 1 and Malachi 2. I know this is complicated, but what had happened, and if you remember all the way back to the beginning of this video, I said that the Levites were to give the best of that 10%, while the rest of the Israelites were not expected to do that. Whatever was given by the Israelites, the Levites had to give the best of the 10% to God. But that's not what they were doing. The priests were keeping the best for themselves. And they were giving God all the rest. The worst. They weren't, when they were robbing God, Malachi 3:8, let's just go through that again. Will a man rob God? Yet ye have robbed me. But ye say, wherein have we robbed thee? In tithes and offerings. Ye are cursed with a curse, for ye have robbed me, even this whole nation. It wasn't that they weren't offering tithes. God wasn't accepting them. He said, I won't accept, you give these tithes, give these offerings. I won't accept them, because they were giving the worst. They weren't giving the best. And so they were robbing God in the tithes, not through lack of them. They were still tithing. They were just not tithing in the way that God had told them to do. Malachi 3 starts with God telling of the coming Messiah. Malachi 3:1, behold, I will send a messenger, and he shall prepare the way before me. And the Lord whom ye seek shall suddenly come to his temple, even the messenger of the covenant, whom ye delight. And behold, he shall come, saith the Lord of hosts. But who may abide the day of his coming? And who shall stand when he appeareth? For he is like a refiner's fire, and like fuller's soap. And then in verse 3 and 4, we see that God is still directing his words at the sons of Levi and telling them that the offerings will again be pleasant and like they used to be. Malachi 3:3, and he shall sit as a refiner and purifier of silver, and he shall purify the sons of Levi and purge them as gold and silver, that they may offer unto the Lord an offering in righteousness. Then shall the offering of Judah and Jerusalem be pleasant unto the Lord, as in the days of old, as in former years. It was the priests who were robbing God. The way in which they were robbing God was that they'd gone away from the covenant. They were offering polluted tithes. It just wasn't that they were not offering, they were just offering bad. I'm just looking at there's to see really whether there's anything more there to go through in the Old Testament, and there are some more things that you can to have a look at on my website. And I think that's going to be enough for tonight, for this lesson. But in the next lesson, I shall go through the New Testament and look at the verses for what is expected for a New Testament believer. I've gone a little bit longer than I was expecting to do, and I was expecting to get all of it in. The next video will be a little bit shorter, and we'll just go through the New Testament. But what's important to understand, and it was important to go through what we did at the beginning of the video to find out, to understand what a tithe actually was, before anybody tells you that you're not tithing. And even if we were under the tithe today, turn up next week with your carrots and your peas, give those to your pastor and say, well, that's my 10%. So Okay, I'll look forward to seeing you on the next video. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. I know it was quite difficult. You might need to go through it again and watch it. As always, it's up to you. Feel free to reject what I've said, but it is important that we understand that there is different understandings, different interpretations that can be derived from the scripture. One which is clearly biblical, as I've just done, and then there's one which is purely financial, which is what the pastors who preach tithing want to teach you. Feel free to email me, lj@followingtruth.com, if you've got any questions. If you'd like me to clarify anything, go and have a look at this on my website. It's a very in-depth teaching on there. But for now, shalom.